Did you know that only 26% of adults with disabilities are employed? Okay. Our speaker this afternoon is the former senior vice president of Walgreens and the author of the book, No Greatness Without Goodness.
Pretty good book. Yeah.
No goodness. Okay. He helped grow Walgreens from 1,500 to 8,000 stores with the most advanced logistics network in the industry.
With a lot of help.
He also pioneered a disability employment model in Walgreens distribution centers that result in full inclusion for people with disabilities in the workshop.
With a lot of help.
This model has become the gold standard in hiring across industries.
So we say.
My name is Ike Kamala, and I'm a second year Excel student here at Georgia Tech. I believe in inclusion, and I know I will be a great employee. Okay, please give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to our speaker, Randy Lewis.
Okay.
And work in progress. And
This is the story.
Disabled people will work just as hard as anyone else, if given the chance.
Are you doing the same?
Yes. Two of us will switch it out.
Excellent.
Finally tonight, an economic success story that is, more importantly, a human success story. A recent study found that the unemployment rate for Americans with disabilities is 44%. There are laws against discrimination, but many employers still question whether disabled people can really do the job. Betsy Stark found one company with some answers.
At first glance, this Walgreens distribution center in Anderson, South Carolina seems ordinary enough. But look a little closer,
I'll tell you what, I love this job.
and it is anything but.
I have been happy with it. I'm contented. And I've got people all around me that's just the best friends I've ever had in the whole world.
What's special about this place is that Julia Turner and more than 40% of her 700 co-workers are disabled. Julia has Down syndrome. Daryl Perry, who works right next to her, mentally retarded.
What are these things, Daryl?
It tells you all kinds of tips.
Oh, so these are tips on how to do your job?
Do my job.
Eric Tidon has autism. Luann Bannister, one of their training supervisors, in a wheelchair. And Angela Mackey, who recruited most of them.
You feeling better?
Angie has cerebral palsy.
I hope, but, I'm not more concerned this person will show us that disability or not, we all have to have values.
In this building, able and disabled workers do many of the same jobs and earn the same pay.
Corporate America thinks they need to give somebody with a disability an easier job. Everyone here is on equal ground.
Can you please take care of that for me? Yes, sir.
In this building, people with disabilities
How you doing, man?
are not invisible.
When you see somebody with a disability, everybody avoids that person. Here, we come up and shake your hand. Totally different.
The quiet revolution happening in Anderson is the brainchild of Walgreens executive Randy Lewis.
Everything okay?
Lewis has a 19-year-old son with autism.
As a parent, I saw the future. And so the question is, given our position, maybe we could be an example, maybe we could use our position of leadership to try to change the work environment.
This is personal.
Very personal, very personal.
Lewis says Anderson is no less productive than other distribution centers.
People come to me and say, will this work in my environment? Yes, it will. How you doing, Stephanie? This is not just a good thing to do, the right thing to do. This is better.
Does it make you feel good to
It sure does.
every week?
And if anybody needs a big check, come over here and they'll give it to you.
But only if you earn it. Betsy Stark, ABC News, Anderson, South Carolina.
And that is World News for this Monday. I'm Charlie Gibson, and I hope you had a good day. For all of us at ABC News, have a good night.
Only if you earn it. Only if you earn it. Got to remember that. Now, people, can I turn this one off? I don't want to just... Okay. Maybe I'll just stay away from it. Okay. It's me then. Okay. Who has a brown Toyota license plate 44462? Okay. All right. This story starts out. This is my... Can we go forward? I guess I'm going to try this. This is my family. Now that son that they said was 19 is now 29. They grow up faster than you'd ever think. And those of you who are closer to 19 than 29, I guarantee you're still growing up fast. Austin has autism. He didn't speak until he was age 10. And he's trying to make up for lost time if you ever get a chance to talk to him. He drives. He was the first student with autism to go to his school, and he drives. He's sometimes chauffeur to the airport. He has a great sense of humor. His sister there on the left, Allison, lives here in Atlanta. She failed her driver's test twice. One day, Allison has some friends over, and they're sitting around the kitchen table, and Austin is sitting on the side, kind of listening to the conversation, and all of a sudden he blurts out of nowhere, because Allison failed her driver's test twice. He says, "Elmer, Allison failed her driver's test twice." Now, how do you think Allison reacted to that? Not well. Not well. So I was listening to this, and I thought, well, this would be a good time for a real-time intervention. So I said, Austin, you can't talk about Allison's driver's test. You can only talk about your own. Elmer, on my driver's test, I didn't back over a yard. You got to love him. He has that odd sense of humor about him. But Austin has lots of problems. He has no peer friends. Never been invited to a party. Never gotten an email. Never received an email. Probably reads about a 5th grade level. I've never played a game with my own son. Not even a game of catch. And if he's like most people like him, he would never be offered a job. Something we parents start thinking about almost the instant we get the bad news. Because a job could mean a difference in a whole life. Security, friendships, possibilities. But when it comes to getting a job, what I do know as a parent and as an employer, that people with disabilities die a death of 1,000 cuts. The unkindest of which is the belief by most people that people with disabilities really can't do the job. It's a great thing to do if you can afford it. But otherwise, it's a charity thing to do. That's what I knew that we were facing. So, knowing that, we started out trying to hire some people with disabilities. And we, let's see if it'll advance. I guess we're going to do this. Do it this way. We hired out some groups, and they would bring in people with disabilities, and we gave them certain tasks to do that we thought would be appropriate for people with disabilities. And our teams told us, said, this is great. We've given them team member t-shirts and team member name badges like this so they feel part of the team. And this woman comes up in our Dallas center and she shows me this picture. And I didn't know if she worked for us or part of the group. I didn't know anything about her. And she must have seen the confusion on my face because she's in the picture. And I'm trying to figure this out. And she says, she feels obligated. Oh, I'm not one of them. I'm their sponsor. I mean, there you have it. Them. And it struck me like a slap in the face. Those folks were not doing traditional jobs. They weren't earning the same pay, and they weren't us. So I knew that we had to do better. So I asked, you're welcome. This is my aerobics today, by the way. So we said, we have all these folks in our building. Surely some of them can do the job. Let's ask for volunteers who would like to work with some of the folks from that group, and let's hire them and give them a chance. And one of the people that we hired was this fellow named Chuck. Chuck is on the spectrum. For those that we refer to people with autism, it's on the spectrum. And he had never been able to get a job. He had graduated from college with a degree in accounting and drove, but could never get a job. And we hired him now. And he did a great job. And we learned that Chuck's favorite color was purple. And the reason we learned that is because every time a purple tote would pass through his area, maybe once or twice a day, Chuck would stop, let out a yell of joy, and start dancing. Something we had never seen. So managers got together and say, is this something we can tolerate in the work environment? And very quickly they got to working through this. Okay, which would we prefer from our employees? Dancing or complaining? Dancing or complaining? Easy choice. Let's go with dancing. And when I asked those ladies that worked with him, I said, we have a building here of 500 people. Does anybody have a problem with Chuck? Did anybody said he makes them feel uncomfortable? Or has anybody made a sarcastic remark? And she said, if anybody has a problem with Chuck, they got a problem with us. Now we were making progress. So the time comes along for us to design a whole new building. And it was going to be the most modern one we'd ever built. And we'd had this experience with Chuck in places here and there. And at the same time, I had seen Austin do things that I would have imagined impossible. He got his driver's license. He ended up eventually getting a job. But he did so many things. He figured out how to rent a bike. He figured out things I don't know how to do. He learned how to go down to Chicago and take all the money out of the fountains without getting caught. And I thought, wow, that's great. Wow, entrepreneur. He's got his own little business, only runs in the summer. And I'm suggesting getting him one of those vests that say something, like security or something, because all he gets right now is hard looks from the rest of the people that are around there. But he's done so much, and I got to thinking, saying, perhaps there's a group of people out there like Austin who could do the job, but would never be allowed to because of these invisible walls we have around ourselves. Because, oh, by the way, Austin would have never gotten a job with us. He would have, if he had gotten through the process of putting in an application and getting through the initial screening, if he'd gotten to the interview, he would have, if they had asked him a what-if question, he would have no idea, or why would you like to work here? That's the one that's the best one. Why would you like to work here? He would say, I don't know. I've never worked here. That's the dumbest question he had ever heard. And we'd move on. Or a what if? He goes, what if? He's a concrete thinker. We have this bias. All those people in that film, like Julia, she has Downs. We have her checking in merchandise and making sure the count's right and making sure everything about the merchandise is right so we can pay for it. She's the one who finalizes when we make all those payments. It's Julia who's determining that, and she cannot do arithmetic. And Derek Shadon, the young Asian man who has autism, everybody says, well, people with autism only like to do one thing. He likes to do every job. As soon as he gets in a job and masters it and we let him transfer to another area, he transfers. Or Luann in the wheelchair, we had said, you can't get around, the person like that, you can't get around all our center, you're not mobile enough. Or Daryl, the person with the, person he said with mental retardation, with the, it's part of my job, it's tips. Daryl wouldn't have ever gotten through the arithmetic on our examination had we not really been looking. People that we have never given a chance. And we realized we had these invisible barriers. So one of the things we did is we said we're going to have to start with jobs. If we're going to hire people with disabilities, we're going to start with jobs. And we want a big number. Because if this works, we want to be able to demonstrate to the world that people with disabilities can perform as well as anybody else. Because if we hire one or two here, everybody's going to say, that's great, Walgreens, you're a big company, you can afford that. You can afford that. We wanted to demonstrate to the world, oh, by the way, beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond any doubt, people with disabilities can do the job. And not jobs for people with disabilities. We start with jobs. We wanted to hire 1 out of 3 people to be people with jobs. People who probably hadn't ever had a job before. Something had never been done before in the world. And ever mindful, we're a business, not a charity. We couldn't make this a charity. So that means people with disabilities, and we have shareholders that are just as demanding as any other company. People with disabilities have to do the same job, same pay, same performance standards. But knowing we had these jobs, we had to figure out some way to get through this process. Okay, I keep forgetting. Now, when we started this thing, all we had when we first started out, we had a champion, and that was me. That was the person who's the executive champion that's responsible for all this, and I was able to make, and we started this. And then, but after this process, we said we need a measure, and so that's why we said 1/3 of the workforce. We said we're going to change what is the big dream. We're going to change the view people with disabilities, and we're going to have to, and we have a place to start, and we're going to go from there. Now, I have 14 slides that are the same, it looks like. Or maybe we do this one. We have it stay there and make a sound. There we go. We got a beachhead. We got a place to start doing this. Now, what did you do that I didn't do? Let's go to the next one. Then we can go to the next one. Okay. This is the way we viewed our current processes. This is the way we traditionally hire. We go ahead and put an app out there. People apply for it. We screen them, usually using a computer. Sometimes businesses use people that go through those. They pre-screen them, call them up on the phone, have that little pre-interview, and you get called in for a final interview, and that's the process. We knew that people with disabilities, people like Austin, would never be able to get through that process. We needed an alternate way. Now we can go to that. Some way, like people like Austin. And Austin was the one who exposed me to all the challenges, but he also exposed me to all the possibilities. It kind of opened up his thinking. We need a way for people with disabilities who can demonstrate their ability to do the job in non-traditional ways, besides having a bunch of previous job experience and being charming on the interview. That's what we knew we had to do. And if we were going to do that, we had to come up with a different way. So let's go to the next slide. Now what we wanted to do is we said, okay, here's what we want to do. We want to find an expert out there, because we don't know what people with disabilities can do. We're not experts on people with disabilities. We're experts at doing our work. So let's find somebody who is an expert. Let's find us one of these companies or agencies that works with people with disabilities who know where they are, because we can't find them. A lot of people have given up. Let's use them, have them understand our jobs. And what we want them to do, they don't have to worry about having a job history or being great at an interview, but go out and understand our jobs and then do pre-screening. Find the people that you think will be successful in our environment. And then we'd like you to do is bring them in, and on the blue, that's provide the job coaches, and we'll provide the supervision, and let them do the work on a trial basis. Kind of like an intern to hire, sort of like a temp to hire. We pay them, during this period. In our case, it's 9 weeks. And when they're successful, we hire them. As easy as that, a simple little model. And as a result of that, we had a different way. We had 5 things that we think made us successful. We had a champion, that was me at the time. So you can say I provide the cover. I have the desire and the opportunity and the authority, so I can be the executive champion. We have measures, and we know where we're going to do it, and we have this big dream, it's going to inspire us to do it. And we have a way to get to this workforce that we never had before. But the missing part was, one of the parts was, now we were going to do this, and we decided Anderson, South Carolina, which is how far in the car for you? 2 hours? So this place is just 2 hours from you right here, up the road. So if we're going to do this, I live in Chicago. The person that's got to make this successful is that local person who runs that building. They've got to buy in. The local champion, the captain who's responsible for making this happen. It's got to have the heart for it, and it's got to be a great leader to make it successful. It's got to have the desire. So we asked for the volunteers who were excellent managers. So we got that person, and then finally we went out and had to find the experts. In our case, it was one agency in Anderson, South Carolina. And we asked them, we want you to find 200 people in this building, 75 on day 1 and 10 a month thereafter. And that's what we did. And we went forward. And when we did this, you would have thought that we cured cancer when we made the announcement. 200 people in South Carolina, in this little town, Anderson, South Carolina. The Wall Street Journal wrote about it. You saw the deal from ABC News. You saw the NBC came, MSNBC, CNBC came. Chicago Tribune. 200 jobs. And I thought, is the situation that desperate that 200 jobs makes national news? And it did. And one of the people that heard about it was this woman named Desiree. She lived over in San Diego. She heard about it. She's working as a temp. Now, Desiree has a rare muscle condition that requires that she use a walker every once in a while. And so one day she's working as a temp over in San Diego, other side of the country. Comes in one day and her boss says, she has a walker, and he says, what's the deal with the walker? And Desiree says, I don't use it all the time, but sometimes I do need it. And he said, fine, come back when you don't. Desiree packed up her bags, moved her family across the country a year before we opened, just for the chance to be in line. She's a manager in that building today. A person whom we would have never hired because we would have assumed that it would be too difficult for her to get to all the parts of the building that we would want her to with her walker. And people ask, what kind of disabilities can we not hire? I remember the discussion about mental illness. That's a scary one. We're going to hire people with mental illness. And I had never considered it, but I thought about it. And I thought, I know with a company, 200,000 people, I know we have people with depression or fits of anger or change in personality or obsessive compulsive disorder, paranoia, and that's just the senior executive team at Walgreens. So let's try it. And we did. And the truth be told, we haven't found a single disability that we would automatically disqualify, because every disability is a spectrum. For instance, we can't hire every person with autism, but we've hired a lot more than we would ever have thought. Same way for cerebral palsy. A lot more than we ever thought. We've hired all kinds of people because we opened up our thinking to how did we really want to do this? Now, so when we got some great people, we got a person like Angie. You saw her in the film. She graduated from Clemson with a master's with honors, had 30 interviews and not a single job offer. And maybe that was because Angie has a different way of walking, what she calls her sexy walk. Or she's difficult to understand at first. But Angie is probably the best HR person I've ever worked with in my career. And she's no longer at Anderson. She's head of HR in Pendergrass, our center in Pendergrass. A person we would have never hired because we would have said, maybe some people would have difficulty understanding Angie on the floor because it's a loud environment. And we would have taken a pass. Just like we would have had a Desiree. Or this young man, Harrison, who came out of the school system, 18, has autism. And I met him one day, and he said, Randy, I can process 10 cases a minute. 10 cases a minute. And I said, Harrison, that's great, but we don't measure in minutes. We measure performance in hours. How many can you do in an hour? If you can do 10 a minute, how many can you do an hour? He goes, I don't know. And I said, I had to think about this. Okay, what's 60 times 10? And he goes, I don't know. Now, I know it's 600. I know we had hoped for 400. Here's a young man who performs that job and every job we've given him at 150%, who would have never gotten through the arithmetic test on the application form. And there are hundreds like them. And people will ask, how did this turn out? This turned out to be the most productive center in the 100-year history of our company. We studied it. Oh, yeah. What we had hoped to achieve worked. I remember the CEO one time after we got started, he asked me, pulled me in his office, he said, will this really work? And I gave him the answer that he wanted to hear. If it doesn't, you'll never know. He said, okay, good to go. We studied all the data. People with disabilities perform the same, work safer, have less workman's comp costs. So that's a big concern among employers. You know, they're going to cost more, or this is more dangerous, there's going to be more accidents. Our health costs are going to go up. Again, these are things that are claimed but have no evidence in data. We did not find that. Our health care costs did not go up. Performance was the same. Our retention was better. Our absenteeism was less. And how do we know that? Because we know in this country, I don't know if it happens at school here, but it happens in all our centers across the United States and in our stores. There's a flu that goes through this country that nobody's talking about, this national epidemic. It's the day after the Super Bowl. There's this one-day flu that takes this country by storm. It's the Patriots. Right on. Okay. So, this is a group that shows up. All the things that we hope for. Now, the interesting thing about this was the impact it's had, not on the workplace as far as doing the work, the impact it had on culture. We're really surprised. We didn't know. What we told people on the floor, we want to make this successful, and our standard is, if we can't do it, nobody in the world can. That's essentially that. And when you find a process that gets in the way of an inclusive and effective workforce, figure out a way around it, and if you need help, then call up corporate, and maybe we can do something about it. That's essentially how we went into this. And what happened is managers, when you have 30% of your workforce, you cannot carry people. You can't have mascots over here to the side. It doesn't work. But nobody wants to fire a person with a disability because it's a prejudice. People with disabilities have stigma and prejudice, but it's the only prejudice out there that we wrap in pity and love. So what I'm thinking happened, managers had to manage differently to make all those folks successful. Julia's successful in that building. Had we used a traditional way we work, it wouldn't work. We had to figure out what motivates Julia. She's extremely social, and so we used what she does well. We had to figure that out. But her manager did that. That's different than managing Harrison, which is different than managing Angie. Everybody, and guess what? People without disabilities are like that too. And it taught managers to treat each person as an individual, something we talk about but rarely do. Because we like to have rules for everybody and have ironclad rules. If you break the rule, this is what happens. Well, guess what? In this building, we call it managing in the gray. What are our principles that we want to achieve? And then we can make judgments about it. Let me ask you a quick question. Here's a work environment. I'm going to give you 2 work environments. Tell me which one you prefer. Here's the first one. We're going to have ironclad rules with bright lines, so you know when you cross the line or not, and here are the consequences of those things. Everybody, we're going to teach you the rules, and you know what happens if you break the rules. Okay, everybody got that environment? Okay. Now, here's the second one. Somebody else is going to come up and say, okay, in our place, we have principles. We want everybody to pull their weight. Everybody's got to make a rate. But guess what? We're going to have principles. So we're going to take each case as an individual and consider the circumstances. We're going to have principles, not so much rules. And we're going to apply judgment to each one and try to have the right outcome for everybody. And we're going to make mistakes. Make no mistake about it. If we do this, sometimes it may go against you, but we're going to give it our best efforts to come up with the right answer for everybody. Okay, you got that environment? Which one? How many people want to work over here? How many people want to work over here? Amen. I've talked to tons of people about this. That's what everybody wants. Now, it's easy to manage over here. We talk about that. It's easy to manage that. You can give the rule book to either any of my kids. They didn't even have to be in high school. Anybody can manage by the rules. It's tough managing over here by principles. And by doing so, they became more effective managers. And what we open the doors to a lot of our competitors come in and a lot of other companies and show them this model. It's when they talk to managers is when they get excited, because they find managers talk about how they make people successful and how people think about each other before they think about themselves. That's what gets everybody excited. So I want to show you, I think there's a movie now, is there? I don't know. You have to forgive me. Oh yeah, the guy made a study on it. I can do it. I got it now. There's a study on this, and so here's the managers talking about what it's like to manage there. Why have power if we don't use it for good? 2007, Walgreens launched a new generation of distribution centers like no other in the world. The objective was to build the most productive center ever and to employ a large number of people with disabilities.
That I've never allowed into my management style, nor into any facility that I've ever been into, and that's managing with love, managing with care, managing with a heart. That's the big change here.
It's all about the people.
To manage and be successful in our building, you have to focus on the individual.
Everybody has a different thing, but it is up to me to defend what that everybody has.
Takes a lot of creativity and to come in with no fear.
I am allowed to be creative with a team member. That it's not a hard line stance to where either you get it or you don't get it. It's an opportunity to see what the issue is and work with that team member.
But the relationship that you make with an individual, whether they have a disability or not, makes or breaks that person's success.
We are very focused in this building on making folks successful.
As far as the key indicators that we look at for safety and productivity, we're number one.
We started each day as one. When Daryl made production, we all made production. When Melissa did excellent at accuracy, we all did excellent with accuracy. When John worked safely, we all worked safely.
It changes the whole culture of the building. We would have a team that thinks about other people before they think about themselves.
We all do things.
We need a better manager, we need a better man, we need a better father, and a better husband.
I'm a better leader because of it. I got more compassion, got more patience, which has not always been a strong suit of mine. I see folks for who they are now, as opposed to who they were.
People with disabilities perform the same jobs, earn the same pay, and are held to the same performance standards as everyone else. The center is the most productive in the company's history. Over 30% of the workforce has a disability. Most had never been able to secure a steady job before. The idea spread, and within 4 years, over 1,000 people with disabilities were working in centers across the country. Thank you. So this is what it looks like in that building. That's 175 people. I think there's over 200 now. We realized it was not necessarily about the automation and all the technology. It was about the desire to do so, the intent, the purpose to do this. That's the biggest indicator, the desire and the authority to do it, to give people a chance, to open up our thinking to something different. And we brought in all the other center managers, and they saw this and they said, I like the culture. This is where it's about us and not about me. I want to do it in their building. So they set a goal for themselves for 10% of the workforce within 4 years, and that's what it looks like today across the distribution centers. Yesterday I checked with them, it's now 14%, and the current goal is 20% of the workforce. You cannot be charity when it's 10% of the workforce. You cannot be charity when it's 5%, and I guarantee you, when it's 20%, it's not just as good. You're saying this is better. That's the way it's worked out. And to our promise, we opened up our doors to everybody to come in, and we gave it away. We gave it away, and that's what gave it power. When we said, we're going to do something and prove it and give it away. And guess what? Each year there's more companies than there was the year before. I've seen this list grow. Is it growing fast enough? No, it's not. But guess what? It is growing. This is something that will not turn back. This is something that is here to stay, that will get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's examples like this, these companies and others showing each other that this is not just a one-time thing. Amazon considers this their secret weapon. They have a director of alternative workforce. They even got a great title for it. And it's a secret. Because it's their strategic secret. Let Amazon do that. But before long, and I guarantee in some of you students' lifetime, you're going to see, this will be remembered back in the days when they were riding horses to work, as far as what's going to happen. Yes. This is the best thing we have ever done. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for helping me through this. And Ike, thank you for the best introduction I've ever had. I'm done. What do I? Oh, there's questions? Oh, I thought there was dessert.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I have, I guess, a little more of a personal question, but when it comes to companies that, for instance, a company I'm going to work for doesn't currently really hire anyone with disabilities, and a lot of times online when I've been filling out applications, they ask, to check the boxes of disabilities you have, and I do suffer from mental disability, chronic depression, OCD, and anxiety, for instance, but a lot of times I'll prefer, check not to answer, just because I am afraid of them maybe not hiring me based on that. What advice would you give to maybe opening up that, changing that stigma within a company as someone who's not very high up, if that makes sense?
Did everybody hear the question? Should I disclose on the application? Here's what happens. On some applications, this is what happens. If you check that box, that goes over to the side, and the rest of the application flows through the process. So they never see that you have a disability until you've been hired. So the hiring people making the decision about you do not see that. Okay, that's the way some companies do it. And that's probably, it's in their self-interest. Elsewise, they seem discriminatory. It opens them up to, it's in their self-interest not to disclose it until they've made a decision about hiring it. So do I think there's a real problem beforehand? No. So I say no to that. And it takes brave people. Until we see people who we see as people in this stand for it. That's what happened in the gay community. We finally realized we live around gay people, and we didn't know that. And you start seeing people as people. It's going to take people, the people in businesses inside say, oh, by the way, to disclose their disability. Oh, by the way, I have a hidden disability. I have MS. I have depression. I've demonstrated my explosive anger disorder. That was really a diagnosed thing. I mean, but it takes us to say, that was kind of a joke. That was the CEO's joke to me. But it's going to take some bravery. Now, the practical thing, as your parent. My daughter has bipolar. She's been diagnosed with bipolar, and she asked me the same question, should I disclose? And I say, why would you do that? What's in it for you? I can see a lot of negative side if it gets out, because I hear stories too. Unfortunately, I was at a meeting, and this young woman was a lawyer, and she was so articulate. It was a group of students, let's say from Georgia Tech, but they were up in Washington area, and they were telling their stories. And I remember her story. She had a tic. She probably had Tourette's, but she talked about a mental illness, and she disclosed. And she said, from that day forward, I was forever the crazy person. So there's the downside too. And oh, by the way, so corporations. So I'm not going to go out and tell people to disclose until we demonstrate as employers, until we walk the walk. Don't try to get me to disclose. People are disclosing at Walgreens now because guess what? We had to demonstrate that we meant it. We didn't go out there and go, oh, please go out and disclose. That's what a lot of companies want to do. And I can understand that because there's some mandates about being federal employees. So I would say be pragmatic, work at a place that you're for sure, and you can always disclose afterwards. And it's going to need people like you to stand up and say, I am not my disability. And oh, by the way, and you'll be surprised I think you'll be surprised by the reception you have. But it's still out there, so I hope that helps.
Okay. Do companies in the US pay more tax or get incentive if they don't hire a certain percentage of people with disabilities?
Are there tax incentives for hiring people with disabilities?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know of any. Are there? Okay, here's what I'll tell you. We don't care. Because the cost of a wrong employee is a lot higher than in those tax incentives. I don't know anybody that does it for those tax incentives. There are some good incentives around starting people out. For example, there's called the WeTalk, Work Tax Opportunity Act. What's that called? WeTalk, right? Well, WEO is different. This is the tax credit. You work 90 days and you get 90% of the salary reimbursed in tax credits. So there are some like that are good, and guess what? We can use those to pay that savings. We can use that to pay job coaches. That's a good incentive. But just general incentives is like throwing money out of a helicopter to us. So yeah, they are, but it's hard to get people to do it because of tax incentives. Most people do it because they kind of get to the premise of there are people out there that I can't get to that can do the work. And if we can figure out a way to give them a chance, try to make that an easy thing for me. Show me how to do it where I can do it without failing or it costing me more. And businesses will go along. And I think, oh, by the way, do you know what's going to save all this? Millennials. And who are y'all the millennials? You're all behind them. You think the millennials are old guys? What are y'all called? You're old millennials? Okay. Because I know none of the groups, you still like boomers? You got to say that. We still got the money. If you want us to pass it to you. Okay. But the millennials don't have a lot of the stigma that my generation. Each generation is getting a lot better about this. So I'm hopeful it's going to be the millennials who are going to be following this through, because they're, compared to us, our generation is going to be toast because when the millennials start getting control of this place. Because they're smarter. They've been tested ever since they were in the womb. They've been listening to Mozart. They've been listening to Mozart. I mean, they come out with an SAT score. Yes.
Hi. So first of all, thank you so much. I'm not a Georgia Tech student. I'm a parent of a child with autism, and I just want to say thank you for your work in this area. My son is 8, and I hope that one day he will be one of your students here at Georgia Tech. But my question was about, you talked about the skill set of some of your employees and arithmetic and things like that, and I know some of that may be because of their disability. But I'm also learning with my son that there's a very poor graduation rate in public school systems for special education students. What do you think that communities need to do to help better prepare children as they're growing to be one of your employees one day? What can we do as parents to help prepare them?
Great question, because I'm on the end. I'm on the end of employment. Okay, that's the other end of the spectrum. Working in this field, here's what my son went through the school system, and we had IEPs that were about academics. There's a fellow who said, I'm going to give you a longer answer than you wanted, but it's a damn good answer as far as I'm concerned. I forget, somebody said the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed. And I get to go around the country and out of country, and I see things, I go, wow, this is a great idea. One of the programs is in Michigan. It's called START program. Are you familiar with it? What it is on the IEP, and everybody know what an IEP is, right? Yes. Okay. I went through 36 of them. Oh, gosh. Okay, 36. And every one of them was great. Not so much. Okay. But it was about academics. So what they've done, they put the social things that should be happening on that. So you can go online, and that becomes part of the IEP, the social piece. Okay, what if we added the employment skills, the things about employment skills, the self-advocacy, the problem solving, the executive skills, assigning tasks around the house. And oh, by the way, parents, if the school system had come to us and say, here's our expectation. Your son's been diagnosed at age 3. Our expectation is at age 26, he has a full, inclusive life in society. So we want your child, you're part of this thing too. We're going to work on the academics. Parents, you need to work on the things about social and the things that we have to do with work, and we're going to help you track through that, and we're going to give you the resources so if we could do that. Then I found this program in Canada. It's called Summer Employment Transitions. It's been doing in Ontario for 20 years. And I thought this is the most incredible program. Here is their program. They go out in the local community and they find employers and say, give us a job for a college student, not a job for a person with a disability. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to, we put a student with a disability, starting at age 16 to all the time, through college, if they're still in college. If they're still in college, to age 26. 16 to 26 students. What we're going to do is put that student with a disability with the typically able college student, and between the two of them, they're going to get the job done. And what we want you to do is we'll pay for the job coach. The agency says this, and you pay for the student. And the reason we want you to pay for the student because we want you to talk to the student, not to the. Does anybody have? If you have any sort of disability, you want to talk to the other person like every person with a disability is deaf. I mean, that's what happens in a typical environment. But we want you hire them. We'll pay for the job coach, which is the student. I mean, it's a college student. 6 weeks. Imagine in your school district, and oh, by the way, your child's 8. Hot damn, you got 8 years to get this happening in your community. Because imagine at age 16, he goes out and works the job. Okay, and I saw this, and I keep going around the communities. I'm looking for another one to do it. I finally got sick of telling people about it. I said, I'll do it in our own community. We put 14 kids to work. We had 9 employers. Every employer had a great experience. They're going to do it again next year. We're going to double it. Imagine the experience of somebody coming out at age 21. If they get booted out in Georgia, you get booted out at 22. Okay, so that's the way it is in Illinois. Imagine coming through. By that age, they have 6 years of experience of jobs. We've exposed all those employers to the talents of people with disabilities and changed their mind, because every one of these employers were shocked. And I asked them this question on an interview. How did this college student and this young person with a disability perform compared to a typical college student that you would hire? They say they outperformed them. They outperformed them. Well, I'm in next year. Matter of fact, I got more jobs. And some of those people we put out there, they said, can we keep the student? Because we want to keep them. Half the kids we put to work this summer work the rest of the summer. Imagine if we did that. Those are the things we put in place. And oh, by the way, by the time they come to my door, wow, will they be ready? I mean, they'll have more job experience than my typically able children have. The answers are out there. Imagine we do it, and we tell the employers and parents, we change college students, we change the typically able, they become a lot better citizens later on. We've changed employers' minds in the community, and we built the skills of these students. We saw students change in this one summer. This is a win-win-win. Why wouldn't we do this? Why wouldn't we do this? So the answer is there, unevenly distributed. You can go on the site Barrington, BARRINGTON, -SET.org. That's the U.S. version. And we're going to put everything out there, just like Walgreens. Everything we learned, all the forms, how you do it, it's all going to be on the website this year. It's on nogwog.org. It's already all out there, and it's for you, okay? We got one more?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming here today. So you touched upon this a little bit already, and you mentioned that there aren't enough companies that are hiring people with disabilities. So other than combating the stigma that exists, what, in your opinion, needs to be done so that we can encourage more companies to hire?
Well, I think there's the carrots and the sticks. There's a federal directive that says any federal contractor needs to have 7% or best efforts. And of course, companies do what we do. What's the easiest way is to get more people to reveal their existing disabilities. Those people are already in. This is a movement of attraction. What we're trying to do, and there's a group of us, we get together once a year. So this is a club. I want the club to get bigger. And the executives, we meet and we talk about how do we make the club bigger. We just got to have more examples so the exception becomes the rule. Right now, this is new. This still requires exceptional people because the status quo, Jerry Rubin, or one of those guys, yippies back in my day, said the status quo is like cold chicken soup, the fat of cold chicken soup on the world. Status quo is pretty heavy. But one day, this becomes the norm. So don't ever lose hope. And oh, by the way, Martin Luther King said one time on his speech, it was not long before he was assassinated, he said, when they were asking him how long, that was the question, how long is it going to take? I mean, they had been in this thing 300 years. I mean, but the question is, how long is this going to take? And he said, I don't know how long. But I do believe the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We're on the right side of this. If I can see the bend in the arc in my time in this, in the lifetime of my son of 29 years, and that's nothing compared to time in what you're going to live to see. Have faith. It's just 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but sometimes it's 3 steps forward and no steps back. You are the hope that's going to make this a reality. It's what you do. It's what people see in your lives. Once we start seeing each other as people and not seeing people of color or seeing, who we sleep with and all the kind of things that we deal with, all the other issues, how we separate ourselves. Once we see that, that's what happened to disabilities. I'll tell you one story. Most cafeterias, I don't know on Georgia Tech, do your cafeterias self-segregate around race here? No. Okay. Maybe, is that a millennial thing? We boomers blame everything on the millennials. We don't, we're like, everything is cool, we'll give you. All our cafeterias at Walgreens self-segregate around race. Self-segregate. First thing we noticed about Anderson, it didn't. It didn't. And the thing is, I think once you see a person who you thought was not your equal, who is not capable, once you see them as a person, as your peer, as your team, or as your team member, once you see them, just like once I saw Austin. Austin's gift to me was a ton of patience. But his biggest gift was to see past his autism, to see the person completely worthy and complete and capable. Once you see that, race, religion, creed, nothing like this. This is going to make the world better. That's what you're in for. You're not just in trying to find people with jobs with disabilities. You're going to make the world better by your presence in the world. Don't ever forget that. And those of you who carry disabilities, you're going to change the world in ways you will never know. Austin has no idea what he has done. Everybody says, well, didn't he come here? He goes to book signings. Went to a book signing. Austin writes little things that, like Nixon is not a crook. I'm not a crook. Because he sees a Simpson episode and he writes little things in the book. So they pass the book to him and he'd say, I'm not a crook. Austin Lewis, and come over to me, and I'd have to explain what that meant, because everybody's going, ooh, what's that mean? Austin has no idea the impact he's had on the world. That's what you're going to have. Just by your presence, just by your attitude, just by your optimism. I mean, we boomers, we were the most optimistic generation ever. We were. And that, based on some of the things we did, were great. But we left a lot of work to be done. I mean, guess what? Who's the hope? Is the generations that come behind us. That's what you are. Never doubt that. Me and my brothers and sisters, the boomers, we are happy to turn this world over to y'all. Because it'll be in good hands. And I wish you the best in doing that. Thank you very much.